everybody. It's Connie Stewart with SimplySimpleStamping.com. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. It's time for a new Tuesday tip video. So during the month of June and July 2022, I've been sharing my top 10 hacks with you. We've talked everything from die cutting to embossing and everything in between. Today, let's talk about rubber stamping. Yes, if you struggle with getting the great results that you want from your rubber stamping, I hope today we're going to hit some hacks and tips that are going to help you achieve those amazing results every single time. Are you ready to learn? All right, let's get started. If you're creating a brand new project, maybe you have a great idea in your head and you're not sure if it's going to work, this tip is for you. This is copy paper that I have cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I keep a stack of this on my desk. Do you know that most everything I create, I practice with copy paper first? Let me show you what I like to do. So I might start with my sentiment, add my focal image. I'm using the Countless Trees. This is kind of a really fun 2-step stamp. At this point, I can decide if there's something else I need to do. Do I need to move my tree up or down? Now I can take this, and I'm not looking for perfection, but I want to give myself kind of an idea of what size to cut my paper. Looks like maybe about 2 3/4 will be about right. And let's see if we can get this down to 4 inches, because that will fit perfectly onto a piece of cardstock that is 3 inches by 4 1/4. So now I know, I kind of have an idea of exactly where I need to stamp. It's also going to tell me, do I need to move that tree up or down? Do I need to move my sentiment up? I can see I could probably move my sentiment up a little bit, but now I know I'm going to start with a 2 3/4 by 4. Now I can stamp on my good cardstock. I have my little copy paper. By the way, I want you to notice the ink colors and things look very drab and dull on this because it's just copy paper. But now we're going to take that same image. We know exactly where to stamp on our good cardstock. And there's my final product. You see how much nicer it looks than it did on copy paper. But you know what? I was ensured I was going to have a perfect image because I practiced on that copy paper first. So this tip actually leads right into my second tip, which is cardstock matters. It does make a difference. Did you know that there is stamping cardstock and then there's just regular office supply cardstock? So this is the basic white cardstock from Stampin' Up. It actually has a very smooth finish on it. That means it's meant specifically for stamping, because when you ink the stamp, press that ink on, it sits right on top of the cardstock. Where cardstock maybe from the office supply store, well, this is just meant for maybe printing letters and things. There's a lot of fibers in this paper and it doesn't give a good crisp image. It tends to be blotchy and bleed. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to take this stamp and a Pacific ink pad. This is from Cup of Tea. So this is just office supply cardstock. So there we go. Do you see? It's kind of the ink's just kind of sitting on top, kind of bleeding through a little bit. I'm going to bring in some of my Stampin' Up basic white cardstock, and let's look at the difference. Aha, see how nice and crisp? See how we don't get all those little, I'm going to just call them little blotchiness in there? It comes out and gives that nice crisp look. Guys, this is actually one of the first tips I learned probably 20 years ago on why my stamping didn't look as good as others. I said, why is it never looking as nice? And I discovered it's because I was trying to use just office supply cardstock, and it's not meant for stamping. The basic white cardstock absolutely is. And you know what? For a few pennies more, my art is worth it. My next tip, we're going to talk about thin line stamps and solid image stamps, because did you know you tap a little bit differently in your ink pad depending on what type of stamp you're using? So let's start with this one here. So you notice this has a very thin, delicate line. And guys, when we stamp, when we tap the stamp onto the ink, when it's got a thin line, I want you to be very delicate. Tap it very lightly. Now you're going to want to tap several times, of course, to make sure you get it well inked. I always flip it over and make sure everything is well inked. When you've done that, again, remember we tapped very lightly. And now we stamp on our cardstock, and I want to also press very lightly. I don't want to press down really hard, but I do want to make sure I'm pressing all the way around my block, just giving it just gentle press so that when I lift, look at that, I get a nice, perfect thin line image. All right, now let's move on to a solid image stamp. So for this one, we actually want to tap a little bit firmer. We have no problem kind of getting that ink on there. Again, we want to make sure we have a nice solid image. And when we stamp, we're going to go straight down and we want to give it a firmer press because we want to make sure we're getting all surface area of that solid image stamp. And there we go. You see, there we go with that nice, deep, rich color. Now I'm going to give you one more tip, and that is, you notice this was a photopolymer stamp, and this was a red rubber stamp. Another tip that I have when you're using the photopolymer stamps, Stampin' Up! Carries something called a Stampin' Pierce mat, and it's used for stamping and for doing paper piercing. Well, when I ink up this stamp and use that cushion underneath me, again, I'm going to give it a really good press, but what's nice with this mat is it's kind of pushing back. Again, that's just going to ensure those nice, deep, rich colors. So remember, thin line stamp, tap lightly. Thick, solid line stamp or solid image stamp, you can tap on your ink pad much firmer and press firmer. Another tip I have for you is when you're using a really big stamp. Typically, when I have a great big stamp where I realize it will not fit directly onto that ink pad, I like to put my stamp side up and tap my ink on. So basically, instead of the rubber down to the ink pad, I like to take the ink pad and tap it onto my rubber. Now this one is more of a solid image, so I want to give it a little bit firmer tap. It is a photopolymer, so that's a great reason to have that Stampin' Pierce mat underneath me. And when we press, I want to make sure I'm pressing all the surface area so I don't miss anything. And now I get that great image. Now I want to point something out because I'm actually glad this happened. Do you see? I have a little spot there. Do you know what happened is I picked up a little piece of fuzz there on my O before I stamped it. Guys, this happens. I need to come in and clean that. I always say I probably picked up a piece of dog hair because that just seems to be what's happening in my stamp room. So now that we've cleaned it, let's try that again. We'll tap onto our stamp, give it a press, and look at that. Yep, this type of thing happens. And you know what? Since it did, I'm going to share my tip on how I can fix that. I'm simply going to come in with the Stampin' Right marker. I was using that Sweet Sorbet. And if you will just tap, tap, tap right there, we can make that just flat out disappear. Another tip I have for you is to stand up when you stamp versus sitting down. When you're sitting down, your vision is kind of more at a flat level, but when you're stamping, when you're standing up, you can see straight down. You can see through your clear block and you make sure you have everything nice and straight. I love to stand. In fact, my stamping table is a standing table. I don't have the ability to sit. Well, I have a bar stool. I don't use it very often. I can sit if I need to, but I really prefer when it comes to actually stamping that I am standing up. It truly makes a difference. So let me give you an example. So we're going to tap lightly in our ink pad. We are going to stand up, and you see she's got little feet, so I want to make sure she is straight and I can see straight down. I'm going to give that kind of, remember it's thin, so we use that thinner press. And my friends, the key is to not rock the stamp, okay? You want to just stamp straight down and lift straight up, because if we stamp like this and we rock it, well, look, I caught the edge of the stamp, and it can actually start to fuzz out and blur many of the lines in your stamp. But you know what? I'm glad this happened because it's kind of my little bonus tip for today. If you tend to ink up and you get a little heavy-handed, you know, you tap a little too hard. Oh my goodness, look at that. I have a mess, right? Well, let me show you what we're going to do to fix that. First thing is I'm going to clean this stamp. I want to get all that ink off of there. I love using my chamois for cleaning my stamps. It's so easy. So now let me take this off the block for just a minute. And you can see there's just like some excess rubber here. And that's fine. But if you're heavy-handed and you tend to catch the edges, here is what I like to do. This is a pair of paper snips that I use specifically for cutting rubber. You see it has a little ribbon on it? Yep, that's the one that tells me I'm only using it for cutting rubber. Guys, these scissors will cut through rubber like butter. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up the edge of your scissors with just the rubber, not the foam, just the rubber. And so can you see, I'm just coming along and just snipping away. Let me remove that. You can see there's the foam. I'm leaving the foam in place. I just want to come in and snip away this excess rubber. If you need to, you can put it on a block. And what that will do is hold it in place. You can see I can kind of get down into some crevices here. And by the way, I have to tell you, I'm using the exact same paper snips that I have been using to cut rubber for years. Okay, so this isn't one of those that you have to keep buying new ones, keep replacing it. But if you have to get down into a little corner, you can do it that way. If you cut into the foam, that's fine. I just don't like to. I like to keep the front of my stamp looking good. And yeah, really all we have to do is just snip away this excess. Now, do you need to trim all of it? Not necessarily. If you just have one spot that you tend to hit, you can trim that away. Is it pretty? No, but you know what? Now when I go to stamp this, tap, tap lightly, remember, and we go and we stamp. I have no edge to catch. I've trimmed it away and I'm guaranteed not to hit that. Love to trim my stamps. How about this? Have you ever had a stamp that you say, oh, it won't fit in my punch. It's too long. What am I going to do? And sometimes we really want to use that perfect sentiment, so tiny, so precious, so perfect on a baby card, but it's too long. Here's what I'm going to do. Now, this is a photopolymer stamp, and this tip will work with either photopolymer or red rubber. Are you ready? Don't freak out on me. I'm literally going to come in between the comma and the word so and snip. By the way, using my cutting scissors, I now have a separate sentiment. I can now put these on two separate blocks because I now have two separate stamps. So I can say so tiny and so precious. By the way, thin line stamp, so I'm tapping very lightly. And now I can give that a punch. Now I can use that sentiment that way, but Connie, I want it to go long. What do I do? You know what? This is what's so awesome when you cut these. It's just like putting together a puzzle. You literally are just going to line those stamps back up. I did no trimming on that because now it's back to being one stamp again. And like I said, you can do this with your red rubber stamps as well. You're just going to cut straight through. The only thing I want to just advise you about, well, let's use this for an example. There is so little space in between that butterfly and her nose. It would be a really tight fit if you didn't want that butterfly. You could use an X-Acto knife and you'd be able to get through there, but I'm going to tell you, I would be a little concerned about getting my scissors through there without cutting the actual image. But if you are good and careful with an X-Acto knife, you can. But this technique doesn't work with everything, but it sure works with a lot of stamps. I tend to use it mainly with my sentiment stamps because just like in this situation, I needed that to be two separate phrases. Let's tackle crooked sentiments. Okay, we've all had this happen, right? So we've got our stamp and we try to stamp it perfectly straight and it never comes out the way we want. Doggone it, I hate it when that happens. I use this tip daily in my stamping. I really do. And that is using Stampin' Up! Grid paper because you see we have all these little 1/4-inch squares. I use those. So I'm going to take this stamp. Great works are performed not by strength, but by perseverance. I zoomed my camera in because I wanted you to be able to see. I'm going to take my stamp, and it's not inked yet, and I'm going to line up the name Samuel Johnson, and I'm just going to line that up on this line. It's just kind of a visual. I'm trying to see through the stamp and do my best to line that up. I'm going to take my clear block, and what I want to do is I want to line this up with any line on the grid. Doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to use this bottom line right here. So I came straight down with my block because I had that visual. Now, I test everything, because a good stamper would test, I'm going to tap lightly and just anywhere here on my grid, I'm going to line up my block. Remember, I lined it up on the bottom. I'm going to line that up with this line on my grid. I'm going to give it a stamp and let's see how I did. Not too bad, but I feel like the word great works. It's moving downward a little bit. So I'm just going to give that a little lift and squish it up. Let's try it again, lining that up with a bottom line. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Now when I go to stamp this, and of course now we can see, had I done this first, I wouldn't have this crooked image right here. I actually kind of did that for a reason because I wanted to show you how I lined that up with my cardstock. As I said, I use this tip every single day. So I'm going to take my cardstock and I'm just lining it up on a grid. It doesn't matter which one. But once I have that, now I can stand over my stamp, line it up on a grid right there. Bear with me because I'm really far away from this, but look at that. Now I have a straight image. And you know what? If I didn't, it's a good thing Stampin' Up! Has this magic two-sided paper, and we'll line it up on a grid all the way around. Doesn't matter which one. Line that up. Stand straight over it. Use a line on your grid paper. And that's how you're going to get perfect stamped sentiments every single time. Hey, don't worry if you've missed any of my tips and my hacks. I've got a free download for you over at simplysimplestamping.com, or you can look down in the YouTube description. There's going to be a direct link for you there. You can download this, save it to your computer, whatever works best for you. And if you're ever struggling again, go back to that hack tip sheet and you're going to have everything that you need right there. Okay, I've got more hacks to share with you, so let's finish up. Looking for a way to make a quick and easy background? I've got a couple different tips for you. I'm going to take a Daffodil Delight ink pad in this image that I created earlier. How about we add a little color? I'm going to just use my blending brush and that Daffodil Delight and just give myself a little color here. Kind of looks like the sun now. It kind of makes my image pop a little bit more, doesn't it? I'm just going to tap on there. Rub a little bit off on grid paper because it can be a little strong when it first comes out. I always say less is more. You can always add more if you need it, but you can't take it away. So I always start with a very light touch and just add a little quick color with a blending brush in any color of Stampin' Up's 50 colors. You've got lots of choices. Another way I love to add color without coloring anything in is using what I like to call my blob stamps. So these are just watercolor images. They don't necessarily mean anything, but they are great for this technique. So, well, you know the drill. We're going to practice on our copy paper first because we don't know how this is going to look. So I can stamp my sentiment there, stamp my tree, and we're simply going to ink up that blob stamp. Now I'm going to tell you, I think it's going to be pretty bright. Let me show you. That's a little bright. So I'm going to stamp off once and then stamp it here behind my tree. I don't know, what do you think? Do you like that? It gives me the opportunity to see it here first, whether or not it's a look that I want. Let's give it a go. All right, so we practiced on our copy paper. We liked it. We went ahead and did it here on our card. So there's the one that I did with just a blending brush. Here's one that I did with a blob. Let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like on my card. You know, and I kind of like it. It's just a great way to add a burst of color to create a quick and easy background. And I think using blob stamps, and we have a lot of them in the Stampin' Up! Catalog, so be sure to check those out and use them in a unique way. You know the old phrase, but wait, there's more? There's another quick way you can add color to a background. I have got one of our water painters. Now, when you buy the water painters, you're actually going to get 3 different sizes, a large, a medium, and a small. I'm going to use the large one. I actually have rubbing alcohol in mine because it dries faster, and I like that. I'm going to create myself a little ink pad with a clear block, and I'm just going to tap that into my Daffodil Delight ink. And I'm going to take my water painter. There's a little button that says push. We're going to give that a push until we start to see the rubbing alcohol or water, whichever you decide to use, starts to show up. And we want this nice and wet. I've got just a piece of my regular cardstock, my regular basic white cardstock. Let's get that nice and soggy. And I'm just going to paint a very simple watercolor wash. The reason I like to use the rubbing alcohol is it dries very quickly and it doesn't seep through on my cardstock. You can also do this technique on watercolor paper, of course, but it is nice to know that you can do it with just your basic white. I'm now going to rinse this under the sink, both of these, to get that yellow ink off. I'm good to go for the next time. And in the time it took me to do that, my cardstock is starting to dry. I'll come back in with some grid paper, stamp my sentiment, stamp my tree, and there you go. Instant backgrounds with a blending brush, with a great blob stamp, or watercolor painters. Either way, a great way to add those fabulous backgrounds like that. Have you seen this tool in the Stampin' Up! Catalog and thought, what is it? And what is that weird name? It's called a Stamparatus. And this is a tool I use whenever I want to make sure an image is going to be really nice and dark. You know, the Party Puffins is a great example of that. I mean, that penguin, I don't want it to come out with a light black color. I need it to be deep and rich. I'm going to share with you how I do that using my Stamparatus. When you go to place your image in the Stamparatus, you want to try to avoid anything being right up here up to this point. And let me tell you why. It's because these hinges do some magical things. They move things down so that you can do some step stamping with it. But it also means you can have a little rough time when you're close to that edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stamp my penguin. You notice that he's sitting far away from the hinge. I'm going to bring, oh, you know what? Before I do anything else, I'm going to bring in my magnets. And I always like to give you a warning. These two magnets do not get along well. Do not let them get near each other, okay? They will stick together. They're going to break. It's going to make you very unhappy. Don't do it. So we want to keep those very far apart. I'm going to bring the little clear mat over, give my little penguin a press. He's now stuck in place. I'm going to bring in my black ink pad. And one of my tips is I take my stamp case and put it underneath me. Kind of gives me a nice firm surface for me to tap my ink onto this penguin. You know, I'm going to do something. I'm going to purposely not ink it well, okay? Just so you can see how great this Stamparatus is. So I bring it over. I'm going to press. Remember, it's a thick image. So we want to make sure that we're giving that a really good press. Lift. Oh, that's not good. Oh, no. Well, you know what? I can fix it. I can come back in now and ink up that penguin one more time. I do want to make sure I'm getting that area there. And you know what? When we bring this back over, it's going to set up perfectly. It's going to be perfectly centered. Give it another press, and let's see what we have. Looking good, but that's that spot that I really missed pretty bad earlier, that I messed up on purpose. So we're going to do it a third time. And like I said, this is just going to ensure I get that solid, deep black image on my penguin so he really pops. There's no white bleeding through. Look at that. It is gorgeous. That is how you can create great solid images, especially colors like black, that can, sometimes the white can show through. We want to make sure we get that. That's ready to go. I can remove this. Well, actually, I'm going to clean it while it's there on my Stamparatus, so I can give that a clean with my chamois. For this one, I'm going to flip it around so I can put my happy birthday right there. And you know what? This one, you might just be able to stamp straight because why? I taught you how. I taught you how to guarantee yourself some perfectly straight stamps. But you know what? Let's go ahead and get our happy birthday. You know what? It looks great. I will just come in and stamp the birthday cake. That is how you get that really great solid image. I'm now ready to color in with my Stampin' Blends and fix my major boo-boo because I had ink on my hands. I'm actually quite inky today with all these tips. My final tip, have you ever wondered, will this punch work with that stamp set? Will this die work with that sentiment? I'm going to share with you my trick for finding out how. Let's start with punches. Will a punch work? I've just got some scrap cardstock here. I am going to punch my label out of that piece of cardstock. I can simply bring in my catalog and let's say we want to see if the happier than happy for you will work. Yep, that works great. Will the fox fit in it? No, not really. He's a little small, but our owl will, because the images in our catalog are shown to you 100%. This is exactly the size of the stamps that you're going to get. Now, a word of warning. The image that you see on the front of your case is not necessarily the same size. That's just an image to help you. But inside the catalog, you'll be able to see what this image will work with. You are wonderful, friend, and maybe a little flower next to it. Life is better with friends like you. Many thanks. Yeah, but here I can see, oh, that one's not going to work. To a friend that makes me smile, use this little template and your Stampin' Up! Catalog, and you'll always know if it works. Now, the same is true with your favorite die set. So here's a really great sentiment stamp, Peaceful Moments. I use this one quite a bit. Let's say we want to work with a banner that congratulations, thank you, life is better with a friend like you. Nope, did not fit. Maybe you want to go a little bit smaller. Congratulations. Too tight of a fit, not going to work for me. So I know I want to go with the bigger one. We could also take this stamp set here, this birthday wishes, and we have some circles. Pretty big. Let's go down a size. That fits pretty good. Can we go any smaller? No, we cannot. So I can see that with that circle, that's the one that I'm going to need to die cut so that I can use that with my birthday wishes. And of course, we could just keep going with any of our shape dies. They're all going to work with this. Just take the die, take your catalog. You'll always know if your image is going to fit. I hope you found today's video helpful. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on YouTube. Thank you so much for helping me with that. And if you have not subscribed, why not become a subscriber? I share twice a week here on my channel, and I'd love to have you join us. Just click that great big red subscribe button, and YouTube can let you know whenever I am back with a new video. All right, my friends, that's all for me today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.